Welcome to Bite Size Bunny, my name's Tony, and today we are going to be ranking every Star Wars movie, including the newly released Mandalorian and Grogu. Without much further ado, let's get to it. In dead last, we've got The Rise of Skywalker. This movie is unbelievably awful. And that's coming from someone that doesn't necessarily hate the sequel trilogy either. It's overly long, it feels like the story never actually goes anywhere and it's just constantly meandering all over the place. They didn't give any of the new characters a satisfying arc, which is a shame because I do think the new characters are the best part of the sequel trilogy. It's very clear that this movie is a studio panic-induced rush job that was slapped together in hopes of winning back fans that they lost with The Last Jedi. But instead of committing to a unique vision, they kind of just gave us the most generic product possible that ended up pissing everybody off. This is like the Joss Whedon's Justice League of the Star Wars universe. We all just like to act like it didn't happen. The Phantom Menace should have been good. It's got some interesting ideas and some excellent talent attached to it, but this is about as mid as it gets. Every line of dialogue is just exposition dumping the plot to you for every single second that goes by. There is nothing natural or authentic about any conversations that take place in this movie, and it just feels awkward. The cast is doing the absolute best they can with what they've been given, but there's not really much they can do with what they've been given. The idea of a Star Wars story that's focused on political espionage sounds intriguing on paper, but the execution is so messy. There's some cool characters here, there's some great music, but that's about it. The first 30 minutes of Attack of the Clones is deceptive as hell, because despite me knowing that this is a terrible movie, I always find myself going, hey, you know what? This is way better than I remember. Maybe it's actually not that bad. The Obi-Wan Anakin banter is fun. The concept of them having to protect Padme from bounty hunters immediately adds some stakes, and the planet of Coruscant adds to this universe in a really dope way. Then our legendary Jedi duo splits up, and the movie immediately goes to shit. The Anakin Padme romance story is really underwhelming. This is something that should have been right up my alley because I'm a sucker for a good romance story. But the romance has no life and the chemistry just isn't there. Not because of the performances, the actors are doing the absolute best they can with what they've been given, and there's little moments where you can see the chemistry is there. It is because of the writing that is so stiff and just awkward. And the Obi-Wan side story is kind of just there. There's some interesting concepts and ideas that pop up here and there, but there's nothing ever actually done with those ideas within this movie. I wish this film was a banger, but instead it is just a hot mess. As far as Star Wars movies go, Solo is one that pleasantly surprises me. The biggest issue with this movie is the fact that it is tied to Han Solo, because those prequel origin story elements are the worst parts of this movie. It answers all of the questions we didn't want to know the answers to, and the answers we get are lazy as hell. But I think if this was a standalone movie focused on the criminal underworld of the Star Wars universe, it would have been a significantly better film. Beckett and Kira are genuinely interesting characters that I really enjoyed learning more about. The various criminal factions are interesting to learn about. I think Paul Bettany is a great villain. Donald Glover's performance as Lando is top tier. He is a total scene stealer here, and he's not in this movie enough. And while I do think the Han Solo elements are the worst part of the Han Solo movie, I do gotta give props to Alden Ehrenreich because he is really good in this role. He's charismatic, he's got chemistry with everyone that steps foot on screen. He deserved a better movie. The Force Awakens is a new hope all over again for the third time around, and watching this one right after rewatching the original trilogy definitely made it feel like a slog to get through. But I will say I love the introduction of the new characters in this movie. Rey, Kylo, Finn, and Poe are all great characters, and I was really excited to see where this new trilogy was going to take them on their journey. I still think these characters have so much potential, and they are the reason this movie works as well as it does. Not only do the the actors give great performances, but you can also feel the passion they are bringing to their roles on this project. The characters really carry this one for me, and while The Rise of Skywalker definitely dropped the ball on all of their character arcs, I still find myself hoping that these actors get another chance with these characters at some point down the road, similar to how the Clone Wars TV show kind of came in and fixed a lot of the issues that were present with the prequel trilogy when it came out. I remember loving Return of the Jedi way more than I do upon this rewatch. It's not bad, but it definitely doesn't hit as hard as it did when I was a kid, and that was probably the last time I rewatched this movie from beginning to end. I think the opening act with breaking Han Solo out of Jabba's palace is a lot of fun, and I think everything with Luke and Darth Vader on the Death Star is some of the best stuff in the entire franchise. But everything else just kind of feels very underwhelming and like a lazy rehash, which is really disappointing, especially after Empire just gave us this rich new experience with well-rounded character arcs for everyone. It's not bad, it's not as good as I remember, I just wish it took more risk. Revenge of the Sith is easily the most competent film out of the entire prequels trilogy. Revenge of the Sith is still held back by its awkward wooden dialogue, but there are some genuinely great moments sprinkled throughout the entire film. And thank God for John Williams' legendary score, because that is the most important character in the entire movie. It carries every emotional story beat and elevates everything that is going on screen. If it wasn't for the soundtrack, a lot of these solid moments would fall flat, and this film definitely wouldn't pack the punch it needs. With all that being said, this is still a flawed movie, but it is a very entertaining one. Even if it runs a little too long, there's definitely some unnecessary fat that could have been trimmed off of this. I think this movie especially highlights that George Lucas has a lot of great and interesting ideas, but he really would benefit from having an additional writer with him or an editor to kind of come in and clean things up a bit. Alright, probably my most controversial placement on this list. I don't think The Last Jedi is a masterpiece. I definitely don't think it's anywhere near as bad as a lot of people have made it out to be either, though. I think this is a flawed movie with some genuinely spectacular ideas and moments. For starters, I love everything with Rey and Kylo in this movie. I think the way Rian Johnson goes about exploring these two characters is riveting. Seeing these two characters kind of struggle with figuring out their place in all of this conflict and being able to bond over that despite being on two totally opposite sides had me glued to the screen. I also think the performances from Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are fantastic, and their chemistry is top tier. If this was a 90-minute film that just focused on that conflict with Rey, Kylo, and Luke, I think this would have easily have been a 9 out of 10 movie for me. Unfortunately, though, we do have side stories with Finn and Poe that are nowhere near as interesting and are painfully underwhelming. It felt like they really didn't know what to do with these two characters, so they kind of just slapped something together for them. Their individual stories lack the depth, nuance, and intrigue that is present with our two lead characters. And it's a shame, especially with how big of a highlight Finn and Poe were in The Force Awakens. Last Jedi is a flawed movie, but the elements that work for me really worked for me. I appreciate that they took some bold swings with this one, even if they didn't all pay off. The Mandalorian and Grogu is a fun standalone adventure that I think works as its own self-contained movie. Does it have any lasting impact on anything else that has taken place in the franchise? No. That may be a plus for some people, that may be a negative for others. For me personally, I was kind of just indifferent towards that element. I went into this with the lowest expectations possible, and I walked away from it pleasantly surprised. I think there's some really interesting stuff there with Rada the Hutt, and I think he is the heart of this movie. And Pedro Pascal is always fun to watch in the role of the Mandalorian. He is one of the best new characters introduced to this franchise post-Disney. This movie knows exactly what it is. It isn't trying to be anything more than that, and I respect that. I do think it's a bit overly long, which I would say about any movie that has released since Empire Strikes Back. And I do think it has a few cop-out moments where it feels like it's about to do something really interesting and then immediately backpedals. But if this happens to be the last time we see the Mandalorian and Grogu, I think it's a satisfying enough send-off for the characters. Rogue One is a movie that has grown on me more and more with each rewatch, because I'll be honest, the first time I saw this in theaters, I thought it was ridiculously overrated. But every time I sit down to watch this movie, I'm kind of just glued to the screen. I really do find myself appreciating it more and more. Sure, we all know exactly how this movie is going to end before it even starts, and personally, that does take away from the tension of the finale for me. But where this movie shines is its characters. This has some of the most interesting and unique characters ever introduced into the Star Wars universe, which allows for an entirely new perspective to view this galaxy through. Not to mention, this movie has a lot of heart despite being as dark as it is. And that heart that this movie has is essential to making this story work. I don't know how you could watch A New Hope and not just get lost in the sauce. This movie does such a beautiful job at giving you this gorgeous sci-fi fantasy world that you immediately just want to get lost in. You immediately want to learn everything you possibly can about these characters and this galaxy. It does an excellent job at giving you this cast of characters you instantly fall in love with, and the way that everyone is giving this movie their all is awesome. The planets, the aliens, the vehicles, the costume design, the special effects, everything kind of just comes together in a way that makes this movie an instantly iconic film. New Hope is still one of the best entries into this franchise, and there's not a lot of Star Wars media out there that comes anywhere close to being as good as this movie is. But there is one that tops it. Empire Strikes Back is everything you want a sequel to be. It continues the story of the previous film without ever feeling like it's retreading familiar ground. Instead, it feels like an entirely new story that expands upon everything you loved about the first movie. While A New Hope was full of whimsy and wonder, Empire Strikes Back shows a darker, uglier side of the Star Wars universe. And it all builds up to an ending that is extremely bold, and I respect the hell out of it. Not to mention, every character has an extremely satisfying character arc, and there are some truly awesome set pieces that still hold up to this day. They're still some of the best in the franchise even. I don't think there will ever be a Star Wars movie that'll be able to top Empire Strikes Back. I think this is a masterpiece, and the bar is just set so high. And there is my personal ranking of the entire Star Wars franchise. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And what is your personal ranking of the Star Wars franchise? I'd love to know.